Why did her obsidian persist in this maddening game? Air sat in her dimly lit cottage, her eyes fixed on the door. For 2 long years, the enigmatic man had consumed her every waking thought. Her longing to behold his face grew with each passing moment, and with the next day's full moon holding the power to separate them forever, an undeniable sense of urgency gripped her heart. The mere thought of losing him without ever gazing upon his countenance threatened to unravel her sanity. A familiar knock sounded at the door, making her heart skip a beat. She got up, smoothing the wrinkles of her chiffon dress before making her way to the front door. As she opened it, a smile spread across her face. Obsidian stood before her, his tall, muscular body shrouded in an onyx cloak. Not a speck of his skin or hair was visible. The Ayeens within her spoke in a cacophony of 7 voices. We say, pin him to the wall and yank down his hood. Air ignored them as usual, biting her lip as she drank him in. His broad chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Despite the pouring rain, he was completely dry, as if the raindrops were avoiding him. Good evening, Diva, he said, his deep, velvety voice washing over her like a wave of warm honey. He cleared his throat. I missed you today. Mind if I spend some time with you? Air chuckled, sidestepping to welcome him in. See? It's not that hard to express your feelings. Easy for you to say, he mumbled, walking inside. Unable to resist the temptation, Air playfully tugged on his hood, not hard enough to remove it, but just enough to earn herself a teasing growl in response. As she moved to close the door, her gaze was drawn to the rich mahogany sky, adorned with hundreds of colourful stars shimmering with ethereal beauty. The Na sun, which transformed into a black orb at night, radiated through a delicate ring of orange light. In perfect opposition hung the nearing full moon, its pale light shrouding the world in an eerie glow. A sense of unease gripped Air's chest at the impending sorrow of 500 more families that month. Her people did not deserve living with the burden of constant worry and despair. When Air was young and naive, she had dreamed of releasing Cialas from the treaty, designed to lead her people toward extinction. But that dream was a death wish, and Air wanted to live. Closing the door, Air redirected her focus to Obsidian, who took small, measured steps, carefully placing his feet on the ground. But despite his efforts, she noticed the limp in his walk. Witnessing his discomfort was unsettling. As a blessed healer, Air could mend injuries and treat diseases in a matter of minutes. On rare occasions, her magic fell short, like with Obsidian's knee problems. She wasn't sure if it was due to the way he'd been injured, which he refused to discuss, or if his own magic somehow interfered with hers. Air also possessed the ability to take away his pain, but the arrogant man had always refused because of the brief discomfort it would cause her. So, she decided to help him in a different way. She reached for his injured leg with her hair. The mint green strands moved with a life of their own, coiling around his knee like a brace. A slight headshake was Obsidian's only reaction as he continued his strides. Air's hair adjusted and elongated to accommodate his movements while ensuring her own mobility remained unhindered. They reached her small living room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. A worn couch, covered with colourful cushions and a knitted blanket, faced a wooden coffee table, adorned with a vase of fresh herbs and a bowl of fruit. A bookshelf, overflowing with her favourite novels and healing manuals, lined the opposite wall. Obsidian lowered himself on the couch, and Air sat next to him, willing her hair to gently massage his leg. "Are you taking your pain medicine?" she asked. He scratched his head over the hood. "The vial broke again." She chuckled. "You're supposed to hold it gently, not squeeze it." "I try, but—" As an explanation, he held up his large, gloved hands. Air used a few of her hair strands to retrieve a pain-relieving tonic from the kitchen counter. "Here, drink this," she said, handing it to Obsidian. As he brought the vial under his hood to consume its contents, Air made a mental note to buy him a metal container when she visited the bazaar in 3 days. 3 days. Ugly thoughts swirled in her mind, increasing the heaviness in her chest. What if by then he was no longer with her? Obsidian took her hands into his, brushing a finger along her knuckles. "Thank you for taking care of me." Air's locks wrapped around his arm, sliding up to caress his feverish skin. "I can't stand the idea of you being in pain," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You know that, right?" Obsidian squeezed her hands. "This isn't about my knee, is it?" Air looked away. Obsidian traced the line of her jaw, coaxing her gaze back toward him. "I've told you before that I'm undocumented," he said softly. "There's no way my name would be included in the reaping. You need not worry about the full moon." Despite his continued reassurances, her anxiety never fully subsided. If something She blew out a breath and tried again. "If something happens to you, I will shatter." He was quiet for a few beats, then said, "May I put you on my lap?" Air loved his distinct accent when pronouncing the word my. It almost sounded like may. And his choice of words was amusing at times. From the little background he'd shared, he'd spent years confined in a solitary cell. It was one of the reasons she'd connected so well with him. She was all too familiar with captivity, and the scars it left on one's soul. "You don't need permission to touch me," she said. "I trust you." Trust did not come easily to her, but he had earned it. In fact, his was the only physical contact she felt comfortable with. "But this is level 2. I don't want to startle you." Given her traumatic past, Obsidian had established a hierarchy of physical contact with her. Holding her hand or giving her a hug were considered level 1. Apparently, putting her on his lap was at a different level. "Permission happily granted," Air said with a chuckle. Obsidian inched closer until their thighs kissed, then smoothly raised her by the waist and settled her onto his lap. Despite her tall and well-built stature from 2 years of training, he effortlessly supported her weight. Air nestled closer to his warmth, inhaling his scent of leather and teakwood. In his embrace, she felt safe, content. Cheek pressed against his chest, she listened to his heartbeats that sounded so much like diva, diva, diva. Obsidian held her for long moments, caressing her hair. His touch always made the strands shudder in pleasure. "I brought you something," he said, manifesting a carafe out of thin air and setting it on the table. A smile graced Air's lips. "You didn't forget." She had once mentioned that she loved tea. Since then, Obsidian always showed up at her house with a carafe. "What flavor did you make tonight?" she asked, climbing off his lap and placing 2 cups in front of him from the lower level of the coffee table. "Black tea with lemon and ginger," he said, pouring her some. He handed her the drink with fingers that were almost 1.5 times longer than that of a normal person. Not that it bothered her. She had grown used to some of his differences. "It's what you like on a rainy day, isn't it?" Air hummed, savouring the aroma as she took a sip. There was a hint of sweetness just as she liked. "Thank you." Obsidian sipped his own tea, appearing to enjoy it. If only she could see his expression. What if something happened to him before her wish came true? Her memories of him would be forever shrouded in a dark cloak. A gloved hand rested over hers, making her look up. "What is it?" Air exhaled. "When?" Obsidian surely knew what she meant, because they'd had this conversation many times. It always ended with him asking for more time. She didn't expect anything different this time, but she pressed on. "Listen, I don't care about your looks. It's your heart that matters." The only thing that would have made a difference was if he were accursed, But she had already asked him about that. He had denied being one, and she would have known if he were lying. The cursed were soulless, selfish creatures who only knew how to take. But Obsidian had always been on the giving end. He was even aware of her ions and had accepted her despite them. Obsidian was quiet for a moment, tapping his fingers on the armrest. Then he said, "I apologize for keeping you waiting for so long. I was just—" He exhaled. "It doesn't matter anymore. Tomorrow, you'll see me and learn my real name." Air held her breath, fearing she hadn't heard him right. 2 years of waiting and fantasizing about his smile, his eyes, his... She could wait no longer, fearing he would change his mind the next day. Why not tonight? A low laugh escaped him. "I'd like to ensure I'm well groomed before you see me for the first time." Air chuckled, raising a hand to caress his jaw. The fabric of his hood remained a barrier between them. Only one more day. "I don't have to wait until tomorrow to give you something," she said, sending her braid to the bookshelf to retrieve a bracelet she'd knitted. She'd used black yarn but woven in golden strands to add some colour to his attire. He took the bracelet, turning it around to study the intricate patterns. "It's beautiful." He put it on over his sleeve and leaned forward to kiss her brow. "Thank you. He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind. For the first time that night, Air noticed how tense he was. His body was rigid, his hands clenched. "Are you well?" she asked. "I don't know." "Is it because of tomorrow?" She hoped she hadn't pressured him into doing something he didn't want. "We say, if he needs to be with us, it is our right to see him." He shook his head. "No, not at all. I've been wanting to reveal myself to you for a while." "Then what is it?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're together tonight." Obsidian grew quiet for several heartbeats. It happened often. He would grow as still as a statue, and even his chest ceased to rise and fall in that state. It was as though his body was there while his soul wandered somewhere else. And he would remain like that until he heard a loud noise or was touched. Air reached for his shoulder, gently caressing it. As always, he jumped slightly, then touched her face, as if reassuring himself that she was real. Only this time, the touch lingered, as if he was trying to commit the feel of her to memory. He traced her cheek with a finger, then moved down to her lips. "You are magnificent," he said, his voice hoarse. The words, along with the feather-light brush against her lip, awakened Air's unspoken desires. Her breathing became shallow, and tension rose within her. Obsidian brought his concealed face closer, and Air leaned forward in response, resting a hand over his thundering heart. The touch must have sobered him because he pulled back, putting distance between them. Air remained frozen in place, unable to ignore the sharp pang of rejection. Obsidian might not want a relationship with her. But why did he make her feel so special then? Because he feels sorry for a lonely, barren widow. She crossed her arms over her belly, feeling the void within. "I know I don't deserve you," she whispered, blinking back her tears. "No." Obsidian shook his head. "That's not what I—" He sighed and pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. She could feel the heat of his gaze as he said, "Make no mistake that I have desired you for a long time." His words decreased the aching in her chest. "I'd like you to see me before our first kiss, though," he added. "I don't want you to regret it. That would break me. Do you understand?" Air wanted to argue that she would never regret kissing him, but she would prove it instead. Tomorrow. "Only one more day, and then you can kiss me wherever you'd like." She bit her lip. "Wherever?" Obsidian ducked his head and toyed with the fabric of his cloak. Air had seen him wield a sword like no Silesian warrior could, seen him sever limbs and kill ruthlessly, and yet her words could easily fluster him. Leaning forward, she kissed his cheek over the hood, earning a sharp intake of breath from him. She giggled. They spent the next few hours chatting about their day and laughing over trivial things. A yawn escaped her mouth, making her eyes water. "Darkness, you're exhausted," Obsidian said, rising to his feet. "Let's get you to bed, Madam Healer."